Hi everyone, so I'm back again to do another video for you. This time I'm going to do an orchid that I have in flower at the moment. So I brought this orchid with me just to show you what it looks like. And this is called Zygopetalum. It's spelled Z-E-G, can't remember, Zygopetalum. Some of these orchids do take a bit of getting your tongue round, so don't worry about it if you can't. That's the orchid that I'm going to do, and I've already made some orchids up here ready for you to see what I'm doing. So you can see that. And just before I start, I'll switch my light on. I forgot to switch my light on before I started. There we are, we have light. Right, so I'm just going to get this out of the way, just for the time being. And we'll get you down to my workboard. Right, now then, first of all, I have got some veiners for this. Now you might not have veiners for this, but the veining isn't particularly obvious on it, so don't worry about it if you haven't. The throat bit will be the difficult part. Now I haven't got any cutters for this, so I had to sort through all of my cutters to find cutters that would do for this job. And what I'm using here is the two cutters from the smallest set of Cymbidium orchids, and I'm using the wide petal and the narrow petal, because like most orchids, if I get the sugar one again to show you, you have your narrow petals in the middle and then wider ones on the side. Most orchids actually have this configuration of petals. The only difference is that the petals are different shapes, and the throats are different shapes, the columns are different sizes, all sorts of things like that. But in general, a lot of orchids do have that configuration. There are orchids that are exceptions to that rule, but majority of orchids, that's how you can tell that it's an orchid, really. I mean, there are some orchids you wouldn't know were orchids, but there we are. Anyway, to get on with it, so I'm just going to get some white paste, which I should have some white paste over here somewhere. What have I done with it? I've got bags of all sorts of different colours, because I've got that many things going on at the moment that I can't find me white one. I think that's it. Yes, there it is. Now I'm not going to use any other tools other than the veiners and your normal things like your ball tool and things like that. Now to do the throat, I'm going to have to do that freehand. Now I think I've done this in a video before, where if you haven't got a cutter for doing that, then you need a template of some kind. The template that I've got for this, when I find out where I put it, is my throat veiner. And I seem to have lost it for the time being, so just bear with me for a second while I find that. Be on here somewhere. I can't see it at the... oh, here it is. Right, so this is the throat veiner. Now there it's got these little bobble things, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the paste thicker at this end to take into account that. Doesn't necessarily follow for all that you do that you're going to do with that, but if you can find pictures, what I do is I go onto photography sites to find pictures of whatever it is I'm doing. That way I can get a good look at the flower. If you haven't got the real flower in front of you, it helps if you've got something to work with. So I'm going to start off by putting a bit of white fat on my board. I'm just going to move those up a bit out of the way. this will come in handy for later, then I don't have to keep putting white fat on my board. So I'm going to start off by rolling out my paste. Now it's quite thick at the moment, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop rolling at this end, at that end there, and I'm just going to roll it out from here. I'm just going to stretch that out a little bit that way. Now I don't want to go too thin with this, because orchids are quite fleshy, so you don't want them as thin as you do when you do rose petals and things like that. So if you take half of your veiner and just pop that on so that the thick part is on the thick part of your paste there, then get your cutting wheel and just go around the edge to get a general shape. Take that paste away and then just cut that off there. Now I'm going to take that off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the edge again. I'm going to take a little bit more off. As you can see there, I've got a line there where the bottom of the veiner is, so I'm just going to shave a bit more off and take a little bit more just off the end there, off of that. Get rid of that paste out of the way for the time being. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the paste on my hand, and this is the same method that's used when you're doing cold porcelain flowers, because you can't drag your ball tool around the edge on porcelain. It works better if you roll it. So I'm going to do the same thing with the sugar paste, just to take make the edges thin so it doesn't appear to be thick. The thickness wants to be in the centre where your veining is going to be. So then get your veiner, pop that on your veiner like that. I'm just going to take a little bit off there because it was just a little bit wide. Like that. Now then, I also want a wire in here, so I'm using you can use either a 26 or a 28 gauge wire. Your wire is going to be strong on the stem because everything's going to be wired and then all going to be attached together. So try and put your wire in low enough down so it's not going to be affected by your veiner. Pop the wire up the centre of the throat like that. Back into the veiner. Bring that thick bit up where you want it to be like that. Then pop the top on. And then we'll just release that from the veiner like that. So then you've got your throat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my silk veining tool, and I'm just going to go around the edge following the veining in the petal, and I'm just going to frill the very edge like that, following your veining in your throat petal. And then round the other side as well. So we've got a bit of movement now in the petal. And then if I bring my foam over, excuse all the flowers that are on it, these are all that I've done in the past. I'm just going to get the petal and then pop that onto my foam like that. So it just gives it a little bit of shape. You don't want it to be flat, although in reality the flowers are quite flat. Like I said before, for the sake of repeating myself, that sugar flowers can look too flat if you do them as flat as they are in reality, so they lose that realistic look. So sometimes you have to manipulate them a bit to get them to look as they should. Now the next thing to do is to do the column. Now as I say, I've got a special mould here for doing the column. You probably have to play about if you're going to model this by hand. I'm not very good at modelling by hand. I do admit that, and it does make it easier, but with a lot of orchids sometimes I have to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off a small piece of paste, roll it into a bit of a sausage and just pop it in there to see if that fits. Now that fits reasonably well in there. So I'm going to get another wire, pop that into the paste like that, and then back into the former. Now as you can see, because it's quite raised there, it's going to push that in and hollow that out. So just pop that on top and just give it a good press, and press it at the sides as well, and then release that from the mould. Now I've just squashed that a little bit, so I'm just going to pop it back in again, and I'm just going to do that again. I caught it with my finger, so there we are. Ease that out like that. So there you've got your column. Now on the flower, the column leans well over onto the flower, so I'm just going to bend that over a little bit like that. You see what I've done there? Unlike other orchids where the column is straight up, in this one it's sort of leaned more over. So I'm just going to put that to dry. So I'm going to put that into my block up there, and we'll get rid of that. Now we get onto the petals. Now like most orchids, I'm not saying all orchids are the same, but most orchids have 5 lateral and I forgot what the other sepals are. We'll call them petals, it makes it easy for you. So you've got 5 petals coming out, 3 narrow ones and 2 wide ones. So I'm going to start off, I'm doing all this in white, although it is coloured. It's easier to do it this way, because in some cases, like on the throat, they have got a white edge, and on the column as well, it's a bit white. Well, it's a bit more creamy actually, but it did start off white when they first came out. I've noticed they've gone a bit creamy when I look at them this morning. So I'm just going to roll my paste out, and then with my trusty little roller, for you that are watching for the first time, this comes in really handy. If you can get hold of one of these, when you get used to rolling your ridges out, you get very fine ridges with this, and it's a godsend. So I've done a ridge up the middle there, so I'm going to cut out 3 of the narrow ones. Make sure you get your ridge up the centre of your cutter. 2, 3, and then you want 2 of the wide ones like that. So we'll just take that paste away. So I can put that back in my bag out of the way now, so we won't need any more of that. Go on. Make sure I put it in the right bag. The trouble is, if you've got coloured paste in your bags already, it can bleed into your other colours, so try to avoid mixing your colours if you can. I know it's a bit of a waste of plastic bags, but it does make life an awful lot easier. Just trying to see if I've got some wires up there I can use. Yeah, I've got 3, so I'll just get one out. So I'm going to use 26 gauge wires for these, which is what I generally do for most petals. Although these are quite small, you can use 28 gauge for these, but make sure it is a white wire, because you're putting it into white paste. You don't want it showing through, so you wouldn't use a green wire for that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this wire into 4. I've got a bit of a kink in my wire there. Try and straighten that out a little bit. And cut that in half. There we are. I want another one for this. I want 5 altogether. Right, so like always, between your finger and your thumb, your first finger and your thumb, twist your wire in so that the stem text that covers the wires doesn't unravel, because it can tear your paste, and you don't want your wires showing through either. So if you do it this way, between your finger and your thumb, you can feel the wire go down the ridge, and if it comes out you can feel it. Your fingers get used to being able to feel this, so you're not got any wires showing. And because these are quite fleshy, I haven't rolled this as thin as I would do if I was doing things like rose petals and that sort of thing. Anything that you're going to stretch or anything that's fleshy, you don't need it quite as thin. But if you're doing petals that are very, very flimsy, then you do need it very thin, like roses and things like that. And I've also been asked by one of my lady followers, she can't get ranunculus right, so I am going to experiment with that. That is one of the things that is very close down the line that I'm going to do. I have another video to do before that, but I am going to have a go at doing ranunculus because it's one I've never done, and it's one that I keep looking at, especially just lately I have been, and that is one that is on my list of to-dos. And like she did, if there's anything that you want to see me do, don't forget to leave comments below. Don't be frightened of coming up with suggestions. If I can't do it, I won't do it. But I mean, I will always have a go because I like trying new things. That's the fun of doing this sort of job. So thin your edges with your ball tool. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. It's free to subscribe. The more subscribers I've got, the better it is for me. The more I can do and the more encouragement I get to do more things. So if you're watching for the first time, just hit the subscribe button at the bottom. And oh, don't forget to like as well. I always forget that one. If you like a video, or if you've got any comments about anything or any questions you'd like to ask, then leave them down below. Right, so I'm just going to pop those to one side, and I'm just going to get my two sets of veiners here and push those to the back. Get those onto my board. So this is the veiner for the narrow ones, and this is the veiner for the wide ones. Now that has got a ridge up the middle on the wide ones, so make sure, whoops, that's stripped out, that your ridge there goes into the groove in the middle of that one. That's a narrow one, we don't want that one. So I want one of the wide ones. So again, your ridge there wants to go into the groove. Same when you're doing leaves and things like that. This is your guide to get things in the centre. Then pop the top on, give it a good press, and take your petal out. Now this needs to be shaped a little bit. Although they are quite flat, I always like to shape them. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a curve back on the end there, and just bring it up a little bit like that, and then onto my foam to dry. So we'll do that with the second one, and the wires come out on that. So if you just pull it back in and go back in again so it's not showing, again, ridge into the groove. Sounds like a record, doesn't it? Going back to the 60s and 70s. My era, that's when I was doing all my night clubbing and things like that. Yes, I am old enough. So just give that a curve back like that. You can see that. Okay. And onto my foam. And then get rid of the wide veiners. We're going to go on to the narrow ones now. Don't forget, if you're using paste that's not sticky like mine is, put a bit of glue on your wire before you put it in. But that's another reason to twist your wire into your paste as well, for the simple reason that if you don't, it will come off easier if you've put glue on. So again, I'm just going to give that a little bit of a shape, curve that back a little bit, like that, and then into my foam. So I'll just do the other two. Doesn't really have a ridge up the centre, doesn't this one? It's a bit flatter than the other, than the wider petals. There is some veining in it, but it's very fine. You won't be able to see it on camera, but I can assure you there is some veining in it. Because these veiners, if you get good veiners, they're actually made from the actual flower. so you know that everything is botanically correct. So anybody that wants to have a go at entering competitions, here in the UK it's Cake International. I can't remember what it's called in America. They have a big one over there. Ours was the first though. They come from all over the world to enter our competition, so if anybody's thinking about entering competitions, ours is the prestigious one that started it all off. Same as demonstrators from this country, including the lady that taught me, went over to America and taught the Americans how to make sugar flowers. So you've got that from the horse's mouth, passed on from one of the original demonstrators that came over to America to teach flower making. Bless her, Maureen. Right, so I'm going to take that away. The next thing we need to do now is when those have dried, then you can start colouring. Now, as you can see on my paper here, I've got 3 colours. So I've got claret from Edible Art. I don't know whereabouts they deliver to, but if they've got a massive range of colours. But if you can't get hold of these, then the nearest colours that you can find. So you want a deep purple, a deep burgundy, and then I'm using a lime green. This is tropical lime from Edible Art. They do 2. They do a lime which is slightly darker, and the tropical lime which is a very light one. Right, so I'm going to start off with the column first. Now, which is that? That's my one there. I should have a dry one somewhere, and I find where I've put it. Oh, there it is. It's hiding under there. Right, so this is the dry one, already done. So the column on this is mostly burgundy all over, apart from a little bit at the top there. So I'm just going to start off with this brush here. I'm using this for my purple and my burgundy. It doesn't matter if you've got a bit of it mixed in. So I'm going to start off by dust all over, right from the very tip, like that. You might have to go over it a few times to make it dark enough. If you start by getting a layer on to start off with, and gradually build that up to the depth that you want. Now I have mixed a little bit of purple in that, so it's got a bit of a purpley look to it as well, because I'd already used the brush for purple. I keep this one for purples and burgundies and things like that. You just build that up gradually. Then if you turn it over, and on the inside it's the same as well, practically up to the top. Just checking the camera to make sure I'm in view, because I do get pulled up on that if I go out of view. So that's that done. That's all I'm going to do with that, is to dust it with the burgundy. So we'll just pop that to one side. Then I'm going to go on to the tongue. Now I've already done that. I got carried away when I was getting all my bits and pieces ready, so I've already done that part. So that part is the part that is going to face down to. So I'm just going to get the burgundy off my brush and get back into the purple now. Now the back of the petal is left white on the flower. When I've finished it, I will pick that up again and show you again, just so I can prove that I'm not talking off the top of my head. And just start from the centre and just dust it down towards the widest part of the lip. Just be careful you don't get too much colour on your brush, so it's on your brush and then off your brush, and then dust it up. That's so you don't get powder going where you don't want it to be. I mean, if that was going to be completely left white, that would matter a lot. As it happens with this, there is some detail in purple up there anyway, so it doesn't matter too much with this as it would with some of the flowers that you're doing. Right, so once you've done that, to stay on that and finish this one off, just going to get rid of my brush into there. So I need a finer brush now. I think that's the one I used, yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the lid that my powder's in. I always use this as a palette. I don't like wasting colour. And when all you do is when you finish with it, just leave it to dry. I'm using isopropyl. You could use vodka if you want, or some people use lemon juice. Vodka or isopropyl is better because it evaporates a lot quicker. So brush quite thick onto your brush, and then you just do some markings. Now it doesn't matter about how good you are at doing this, because it's very haphazard. You don't need to be too neat with it. Right, so that's all we need on there. All on the front, nothing on the back. So we'll pop that to one side. And I'm just going to clean my brush off now, because I'm going to need this again later on. I always keep some isopropyl in a separate jar to clean my brushes, either with the varnish for your leaves or for taking colour off as well. It works for both. Get that back to rights, pop that back in there for a minute, and we'll get rid of that. Right, so the next thing now is to do the leaves. Now, the petals rather. I've only left 2 of the petals to do, because some of them I've already coloured. So I've just left 1 of each, a wide one and a narrow one. So I've got another brush here that I use for my lime green. So you dust all over the petals with the lime green, both back and front. For this one, front, and then onto the back. You can leave the edges a little bit paler if you want to get a bit more definition into it, but we're going to put some more detail on here anyway, so it doesn't matter so much about that. And over onto the opposite side. Right, so get rid of that. Get my brush back out again that I just used for the purple. This time I'm going to use the lid from the burgundy. I've already got some powder in there, so I don't need to add any more. This is why I use these as a palette, because if you let it dry out, all you're doing is just reconstituting the colour that you've already got in there, and you're not wasting anything. I was brought up in a generation where we were taught not to waste anything, so this is a habit of mine. So just mix that in with your powder. Wants to be fairly thick, and then start from the base and just start doing sort of blotches on your petals. You don't have to be too neat. All your petals are a bit different on this, so just do one. It's only done on the front and on the other one. You're not aiming for anything to be neat. The messier it is, the better it is. They don't have neat dots or anything like that on them. Do another one up there. Right, so that's those 2 done. Don't need to do anything else with that, so I'm going to clean my brush off. Always make sure you've got all the colour off your brush before you put it away, because if you're going to use it for something else, you don't want to mix your colour. There we are. So we'll pop that to one side. So the next thing now is to put all the flower together. So I'm just going to get my other petals that I've already done. These aren't quite as dark. I might have to go back onto those and put a bit more colour on those because I've done them. That one's going to be a bit lighter, so just come back into that. Just bear with me a second while I... These are called shot things, that what put shots in. Come in really handy for this job when you're doing cake decorating for colouring things like this. So I'm just going to put a bit more colour on this. I didn't get quite as much colour on my brush when I was doing these, so best match them up onto so that all my petals are coloured the same colour. Let's get the other petals wherever they are underneath my orchids there. As the orchids get a bit older, they do tend to fade a bit anyway, so it doesn't matter if you mix it up a bit, because whichever orchid's opened up first, which in the case of this kind of orchid, the bottom ones open up first before the top ones. They do tend to fade a bit as they're getting older. Right, so I'll just clean that brush off again before I forget. Get rid of that. Now I'll get some tape and put it together. Have I got a longer piece? Yep, I have. There we are. I've got loads of pieces cut already, so I don't have to cut any this time in this video. Stretch your tape to find out which is your sticky side. That's sticking to my finger, so that's the stickiest side. So we're going to start first of all by starting the tape off on the column. So wrap your tape around, get your nail in, pinch it in, and then roll that onto your column. If you start a little bit lower down so you can get it going, that's it, like that. Then push it up underneath your column. Bring your tape back up again. Get your throat petal, and I'm just going to bend that down like that. Into there. Now they're going to move around a bit here. That doesn't matter. The main thing at the moment is to get it taped in. You can adjust that once you've got your tape nice and tight. And starting off with the first two wires tends to be a little bit difficult, because you've only got two wires there. It gets a bit easier as you get more tape on. So I'm just going to go around a bit like that and do it that way. That's it. Got it. And tape down. The advantage of taping down like this is you've got something for the rest of your petals to grip onto. You don't need to go right to the bottom. Now I can adjust my petals to get them in the right place. Another reason being as well, I need to see the wires that I've used there, so I can pull those in. And I've gone a little bit too far down for the other one, for the throat bit, so I just need to find the bottom of that wire, and there it is, and pull that down. Pull them down together so they're nice and tight. Then I can finish that off. So that needs to come over the top of that petal like that. So it's leaning over, so it's going like that. Right, so we'll just pop that to one side for a minute. Get rid of that. And get my tape. So what we need to do now is we need to start the tape off again, up at the top. So stretch your tape, that's the sticky side. So start that off there, right and directly underneath your throat. You'll find these pieces will stay in position better once you get more of your petals in. They do tend to hold each other together, but just make sure that everything is nice and tight and wires are pulled down, otherwise they will flop about. So bend your wire down at a right angle, and that's going to go in to the side here, and it's going to go slightly underneath that petal there. Doesn't matter if there's a bit of wire showing at this stage, because we're going to pull those down again once we get the others in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape down in between these two as well. It just helps everything to stay in position. So get those in and tape down. If you've got a lot to tape together as well, you do tend to find you get a build-up of glue on your fingers as well, which does make it difficult to twist your wire as well, because everything's sticking to everything. So just dust your hands with a bit of corn flour with your dusting bag. Right, so I've got those in position. I can tape down now. I know it seems a bit of a waste of tape, but tape goes a hell of a long way on this sort of stuff, so don't be frightened of doing this. Right, so once that's in, then I can put the other narrow petal in. That one's going to go in between those two like that, and tape down. Make sure that's a bit tight. It was going a little bit slack then, coming undone, and tape down. I don't need to tape right to the bottom, I just want that to stay put. So bring those back round again. If you bring them slightly underneath the throat there, that'll hold that in position. We can pull everything else up once we get everything in. Start your tape off again underneath, bring that back up to the top. Bend your wires back on your wide petals. Now these go sort of in between the narrow ones, and the bottom of it sits on top of the narrow ones. As far as the orchids opening up, these petals tend to be inside of the wider ones. It's like lilies, they're a bit awkward like that. The narrow petals on the outside, the wide petals are on the inside. So I'm just going to reposition that and pull that wire down so that's nice and tight. There we are. And then put the other wide petal into the other side. So just pop it down in between those two petals there. Whoops. Not behaving. There we are. Now we've got it. You will stay in place. Twist round, start taping down, and then you can get those wires and pull those down to make sure those are nice and tight in. Just go around all your wires and just make sure they're all nice and tight, and then tape down again. Once you got to this point, everything should stay in place if you've pulled all your wires in nice and tight. Just be careful you don't pull your wires out if you haven't put glue on your wires. Right, so once you've done that, then you can adjust your petals then to get them as you want them, like that. Turn that round. So that's in the right position. That's going to go underneath that, like that. And then you can bring your petals up a bit. That holds everything in place. Like that. Right, so we'll just get that, put that to one side. I'm just going to get rid of all my colours here now, because everything should have dried that I've used for painting. That's dried, more or less dried in there, so you can put your top on that now. Just make sure it's dried before you put your top on, otherwise you can end up with lumps in your colours, but that won't make any difference, it will reconstitute again. Just move that tape out of the way, get rid of that paper. I've got a bit on my board, so as I've said before, if you've got some powder on your board and it does tend to fly around a bit, just get a bit of white fat on your hands, rub that onto your board like that, and then get a piece of kitchen roll. This is why I go through tons of this. I go to the wholesalers for it because I use so much of it, and then just wipe it off like that. Just wipe all over your board, so it comes off of your board onto your kitchen roll, and same with your hands as well. You can do the same with those. Right, so once we've done that, we can put these together now onto a stem. So I've done 5 orchids here that I'm now going to tape together. So I'm going to get myself a stronger wire. I'm going to get a 20 gauge wire. These come from a firm called Orchid Products, these boxes. If you can get hold of one of these, they come in really handy for keeping your wires together, and you put a label on with what wires you've got so you know what's what and where they are. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut that wire in half because I don't need all this. Just pop that up there. That can be used for something else. And now I'm going to use some full width tape for this one. In fact, there it is, where my roll of tape is, to tape all this together. So I'm going to start that off at the top of the wire. I'm just going to bring my camera up a little bit this way so you can see what I'm doing. Start it off at the top of your wire, and then your first orchid goes in. How much? I'm just going to have a look at my orchid to see how much of a stem I've got on them. Right, there's quite a fair bit of stem on the orchids from the main stem, so I'm going to start off. I'm going to leave probably about a couple of inches of that there. So that's going to be the first one. That's going to go on like that. And then I'm going to put another one in. Now your orchids, when they come out, they sort of go like that, out to the side with the lip facing outwards. Just make that a little bit shorter. I think if you make them too long, you might find that they wobble about a lot. So I'm just going to make sure that you keep them really tight. Keep your tape really tight so they don't move around. So I'm going to put another one in there like that. You can adjust your petals if they move around while you tying them in. Keep that really, really tight. Another one. You can bend things around and move them around once you've got everything all in together. We don't have leaves on these because the leaves come from the pseudobulbs at the base of the plant. So if you want to make it into a plant, you want really long leaves. I'll bring the orchid up again so you can have a look at it. So if you don't know what the actual orchid looks like, you can see for yourself. So the last one's going in like that. Flatten your tape out. It does tend to curl up a bit when you're doing this. Take that off the bottom. Now it's a good idea if you've got some long nose pliers for this job. I'll find where I've put my long nose pliers. Should be some in here somewhere. There they are, hiding down there. And then just get hold of your orchids and pull them out like that. So that's going to pull out that way. That's going to pull out that way. That's going to pull out that way. And that's going to go that way. Now you can adjust your petals that have been moved around when I put them in. So, there we are. That's my Zygopetalum Orchids. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and come back and see me again with all the other flowers I've got in line. The next one's going to be a dahlia that I'm going to do. And don't forget to leave any comments below and any suggestions that you've got for anything you'd like to see me do. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. So take care, stay safe, see you soon. Like that, so you can see the real orchid. And then if I bring in my sugar orchids to the side, so you can see the two together. So as I said before, don't forget to subscribe and leave comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Sorry for repeating myself, but I forget sometimes, so if I don't repeat it, I don't know. So, anyway, take care, see you soon, stay safe.